At first glance, it seems like a classic no-brainer. The federal government is by far the largest buying organization on the planet. They don't manufacture anything. They outsource most of the services they use. They spend hundreds of billions of dollars every year. They document and make available virtually all their purchasing data. They provide forecasts of future procurement plans. They are required by law to give all vendors equal opportunity and access, and they have myriad programs specifically designed to help small businesses. And yet thousands of companies try and fail each year to penetrate this market, and many more survive but fail to unlock the key to growing their businesses profitably. Why is it so difficult to succeed? Bottom line, everything about doing business with the federal government is different than the commercial market. The bureaucracy is huge and complex, the rules and regulations are obtuse, and everything is constantly changing. In this presentation on how to develop a successful federal BD playbook, we begin to unmask the mystery and show that with a structured, disciplined approach, this market can represent real, achievable opportunity and sustainable success for small businesses. GrowthMasters Federal is a nationwide community of growth-oriented government contractors, their executive teams, and the professionals who support them. The purpose is to share experiences and discuss timely topics on planning and executing the most effective growth strategies in the very challenging but opportunity-rich federal marketplace. We're broadcasting live from our studio near Washington, D.C. today, and we welcome our viewers from around the country. We're also recording this webinar, so you may be participating in the original broadcast, watching a moderated rebroadcast, or viewing it on demand. If you're watching a live or moderated presentation, we invite you to submit your questions using the tools on your screen. Otherwise, please send your questions by email to questions@scaletomarket.com. Registered viewers will receive an email with a link to view the webinar on demand and a brief survey asking for your feedback on the presentation. Please take a minute to reply and tell us what you think so we can serve you better in the future. Your host for today's presentation is Shirley Collier. Shirley is the president and founder of Scale to Market and has been working in the federal sector as an entrepreneur in R&D and IT services and as an author, speaker, and consultant for over 25 years. Enjoy the presentation.
Hello, this is Shirley. Thank you for joining us today for our discussion on developing a successful business development playbook. In 2012, after the sale of my fourth technology business, I decided to leverage my experience and focus on what I enjoyed the most, helping senior executives with strategic planning and profitable growth. But what I found is that most small businesses really struggle with business development, especially in this complex, highly regulated federal market. So I figured that if I could help my clients solve the business development riddle and bring in more revenue, then there would be capital to invest in their businesses. I now come in through the business development door, but I take a very holistic CEO perspective on all the plates that must be kept spinning for sustainable, profitable growth. There are basic principles in business development that apply to all companies. We'll begin today with a brief discussion on those basic elements. Those 4 best practices are: first, develop and execute a customized, data-driven business development plan, or as I like to call it, a BD playbook. Second, hire good people for your business development team, then delegate authority to them. Third, clearly articulate a vision for the company both internally and externally to ensure alignment of the BD effort and operations. And finally, regularly and honestly evaluate your playbook, make adjustments, and don't hesitate to pivot with the ever-changing marketplace. Our focus today is on the BD playbook and the most fundamental elements that make up that playbook. We will be exploring market intelligence, or where to find information on federal purchasing patterns and opportunities. We'll talk about identifying opportunities based on historical records, agency forecast, and upcoming solicitations. Then we'll move on to a discussion on how to inject discipline into your playbook development and implementation processes. And finally, we'll wrap up with a review and summary of what we've covered today. We have a lot to cover in a small period of time, so let's get started. One of the most basic principles of success in the federal marketplace is to focus. Focus on what you do well, focus on a market segment you can realistically reach, focus on those opportunities you have a chance of winning, and focus on your strategic goals. A good BD playbook organizes these efforts by identifying specific agencies and opportunities to target, the contract vehicles those agencies utilize, your competition, focusing specifically on incumbents, they may be your future teaming partners, agency and specific program requirements, and in the process develop relationships with individuals within your target agencies, strategies for pursuing those opportunities, and an action plan that specifies who will do what and by when. BD folks, if you're listening to this, close your ears. Most BD professionals prefer to work in a very unstructured manner. They love people and they like to bob and weave, figure things out as they go along. Unfortunately, this is not the key to success in federal business development. A good playbook includes opportunities to prime, to sub, or form a joint venture, and is developed with milestones that recognize that this is an extraordinarily complex sales process that requires a long-term team effort. Each element of the plan and each member of the team must be held responsible and accountable for results. All aspects of the playbook must be monitored and measured, and necessary changes must be made in a considered and timely fashion. Okay, that's a brief description of the essence of the BD playbook. Let's dive in now by examining the critical elements of market research and opportunity identification and analysis. Now, those of you who have listened to some of my other webinars may have heard me talk about where to find and how to analyze public data. If so, please bear with me. This is such an important and often overlooked topic that it warrants attention in any discussion about selling in the federal sector. An essential first step in BD decision-making is to gather objective, relevant data on opportunities suitable for your company. Over the next few slides, we will examine the different categories of data based on how the government collects and publishes procurement information and the primary resources used to search for and analyze opportunities. The three categories are recompetes, or the common term for existing contracts that are expiring and may be recompeted under the same or a different contract vehicle, future opportunities, which show up in agencies' annual forecasts, and in public solicitations. All of this data is public, but there are paid subscriptions like EasyGov Ops, which we like to use, and others like GovWin, GovEni, and GovTribe that aggregate much of this data for easy access, analysis, and decision-making. These services can perform a critical function, enabling you to focus your staff and limited resources on pursuing qualified opportunities. We'll talk more about some of the benefits of these subscription services as we go along. So these are the primary data sources. Beginning with recompetes, over the next few slides, we will break this down further to help you understand how to interpret and prioritize this data and the role it should play in your BD strategy. In most industries, you must consider past procurement actions in the form of existing contracts in your search for upcoming opportunities. By regulation, the federal government records data on all contract actions of $3,000 or more. The data is made available to the public in FPDS-NG, which stands for Federal Procurement Data System Next Generation. You can see the URL here. We'll come back for a deep dive into FPDS shortly, but it is important to note that most agencies maintain their own data systems to track procurements and contracts. So agency websites, contracting offices, and small business offices are important sources of current and historical information as well. And finally, as we mentioned before, there are numerous subscription services available that can be utilized to supplement your in-house research efforts and extend your BD resources. These are definitely worth investigating, but be aware that there are significant differences in pricing and capabilities amongst the players, so shop around, get references of companies similar to yours, and definitely arrange an in-depth demonstration before signing up. So since most companies at least begin their efforts with in-house research, and as FPDS-NG is the go-to resource for historical federal sector procurement data, let's take a closer look at that federally maintained system. Each contract record in FPDS-NG contains 182 data elements, so there's a lot of information to be mined there. Among the more valuable elements are the purchasing agency, the contracting and funding offices and agents and their contact information, the winning contractor, the type of contract, the type of set-aside if applicable, the goods or services purchased, the contract dollar amounts, quantities and dates, the service or delivery locations, and a whole lot more. Now, many of these records are task and delivery orders on large-scale purchase agreements like a GWAC, or a government-wide acquisition contract, and a BPA, blanket purchase agreement calls, and the information about the original master contract can be difficult to trace. You have to be a good, persistent sleuth to complete the whole picture. Sometimes that means contacting the contracting office directly to get clarification, or enlisting the help of the research department of your subscription service if you have one. Some people say it's like putting together a puzzle. I like to refer to it as a mosaic, which is much harder. You don't always know what the resulting picture looks like. The pieces are not uniform, and some pieces may be missing altogether. But it is a valuable component of your BD strategy that can save you a lot of time and resources as you decide what opportunities to focus on. 182 data elements in a single record is indeed a lot of data, but there is a fair amount of information about procurements that is not available in FPDS. Data not in FPDS includes subcontracting data, which can be found in the SPA Subnet website, contract line item details, including specific information about the CLIN, such as NAICS information at the CLIN level, and line item descriptions, funding or appropriations information, statements of work or objectives. You typically have to go back to the original solicitation on FPO and look at all the attachments to obtain this information. The terms and conditions of a contract, labor rates and other details of the contractor's employee or staffing levels. The record will, however, reflect the number of positions if it is a staffing contract, and you can contact the contracting office to get this information. Anything designated by the winning bidder as proprietary is not available. Even if you FOIA the winning proposal, the winning bidder has an opportunity to redact the copy you see. FOIA, by the way, is the Freedom of Information Act. Anything that is not public will not be available in FPDS, so there will be no inside information that will give you a competitive edge. We should mention also that there are caveats associated with the information provided in FPDS. Records in the database are essentially never locked or finalized. Data is regularly modified and updated, so absolute accuracy should not be expected. For example, since the end of FY 2008, there have been over $100 billion in modifications made to that dataset. Furthermore, the data is only as good as the data entry effort, so erroneous information can exist. Large companies can be misclassified as small. Set-aside data can be inaccurate. Data can be falsified, most commonly when collusion exists between a contractor and a contracting officer or an agency, which you should always report to the Inspector General. Personnel turnover rates at the data entry clerk level in the federal government can be very high, which can have a negative effect on the accuracy or even existence of the data. Unfortunately, it's not unusual to find blank fields that should have data in them. The bottom line is, don't expect your search results to be 100% accurate or 100% complete. Fortunately, they don't really need to be in order for you to realize value in your BD research efforts. Now, I spend a lot of time talking about historical data, and I do this because it is critical to your understanding of purchasing patterns, the acquisition strategy of your target agencies, the expiration of contracts coming up for recompete, your competition, historical contract vehicles, how the government classified the procurement related to NAICS codes and keywords, whether or not the agency has met its set-aside goals, and the agency's ongoing needs. It is your responsibility to synthesize this information and incorporate it into your BD playbook. It is what successful government contractors do. We're going to break here for a moment to give our moderators a chance to catch their breath and review the questions that have been submitted so far. We'll be back shortly, so stay tuned.
Now would be a great time to submit a question or comment, or jot down a note to yourself on issues you'd like to follow up on. Today's presentation is brought to you by Scale to Market, and your host is Shirley Collier. Scale to Market helps businesses think, plan, collaborate, and prosper in the federal marketplace by developing and executing customized, data-driven business development playbooks. We encourage you to visit our website at www.scaletomarket.com for additional resources, to find more webinars or podcasts, sign up for our newsletter, or join Growthmasters Federal. Now back to our webinar on developing a successful business development playbook.
Hello and welcome back. We've taken a look at historical data. Now let's talk about future opportunities. To obtain forecast of upcoming spending, you can go to agency websites, their small business offices, online or in person, or the GSA forecast website shown here. All federal agencies are supposed to upload their forecast to this GSA website, but of course they don't always do that. So many times you'll have to go to the specific agency website to find their procurement forecast for the upcoming fiscal year. These forecasts are normally available between November and February of each year, just after the beginning of the fiscal year. However, if the federal budget has not been approved by Congress and we are operating on continuing resolutions, or if the agency simply doesn't place a high priority on fulfilling this obligation, the forecast may be late, or they may not be posted at all. In FY 2018, for example, many procurement forecasts were not posted until April. It is important to note, however, that these are not commitments, but simply what's been approved in the budget for the fiscal year. Okay, that covers recompetes and agency forecast. Finally, we have solicitations. The most common and broad-reaching of these sources is FBO, or Fed Biz Ops, which aggregates contracting opportunities over $25,000 across all federal agencies into one system. At least that's the goal. However, nothing is ever simple. Not all opportunities are advertised on FBO. For example, the FAA is not covered by the FAR and is not required to post solicitations on FBO and has its own acquisition system and rules. Many divisions of the Department of Defense also have their own procurement and solicitation processes and systems, and all GWACs, IDIQs, and BPAs have closed solicitation systems for their task orders. FBO should be used to monitor announcements like industry days and other events, opportunities in the market research phase, for which there have been sources sought notifications and RFIs issued as requests for information, or for the release of RFPs that you have been preparing for. Other places where solicitations can be found include GWAC and agency-specific websites, the SBA subnet for subcontracting opportunities, and eBuy if you have a GSA schedule. Not long ago, the GSA schedule was touted as being the future of all government purchasing. It now represents less than 10% of government contracts. The federal government's current procurement trend is toward what it calls category management, which includes GWACs, BPAs, and IDIQs. This trend is for cost-cutting purposes. It is easier for a contracting officer to manage one $100 million contract than 10 $10 million contracts. But that's a topic for another webinar. The point here is that these sources exist today, and savvy contractors know how they work and have learned to mine them all. Okay, so these are the data sources. Now let's talk about how to understand and use that information. The last few slides illustrated the fact that the databases that contained historical information, as well as the tools used to access them, are different than those that contain future opportunities, which makes it very important to distinguish between historical and future records. It can be very challenging to determine the relationship between historical records, i.e. existing contracts, and future opportunities, or solicitations, or whether a relationship even exists. Just because a contract is ending does not mean that it will be recompeted. By way of example, let's look at a couple of different types of businesses that want to expand their federal sector sales. Construction is an example of a one-and-done sort of expenditure. Although, by looking at records of past or existing contracts, you can get an idea of which agencies are constructing new facilities or upgrading existing ones, obviously not many of these exact contracts will come up for recompete. Examining historical records may help to establish which agencies to target, especially if you're selling office furniture and equipment or moving services, for example. But if you're in the construction business, you will likely need to focus on solicitations for new contracts for future opportunities. On the other hand, let's say your business develops educational curricula, produces training materials, or manages learning systems. Educating people is an ongoing effort with persistent overlap from one contract to the next. In this case, solicitations may not be as important as examining historical records to determine where to find opportunities, especially if the goal is to get out in front of the process, which it certainly should be. So how do you know if a contract that is expiring will be recompeted? This is a data element in the contract record in FPDS. If that element is blank or has TBD, to be determined, you will need to contact the contracting office to determine if they intend to recompete that contract. They will usually make that decision a year or more before the expiration of the contract. We have several tools we use to guide companies through the business development continuum toward success. One such tool is the Opportunity Analysis Decision Matrix, shown here, that is used to capture and analyze the data necessary to determine if you should pursue a specific opportunity. Now, obviously, we can't use this image to explain this tool or process, so we'll move on to a more useful slide, but I thought it would be helpful for you to see what the actual spreadsheet looks like. The decision matrix can be customized to meet your specific circumstances. Let's review a few of the key features. The process begins by making a list of knockout factors, or scenarios that are definite disqualifiers. These may include things like, we've had no contact with the federal decision makers, we don't have sufficient past performance to compete, neither we nor our teammates have the necessary socioeconomic certifications, or the opportunity does not meet our minimum total contract value threshold, etc., etc. This certainly is not a comprehensive list, but you get the idea. After filtering for disqualifiers, there are anywhere from 10 to 20 analysis factors that should be taken into consideration. Some of these factors are our ability to perform the work, our analysis of the market intelligence we've gathered, customer relationships we can leverage, the pricing requirements, Some IT companies, for example, have a policy of no LPTA. Others love LPTA. It is their basic business model. Qualifications of the personnel necessary to perform the work, whether or not we have proposal resources, and the strategic value of the opportunity. Will this lead to additional opportunities, or is it a one-off opportunity for this agency? The next component of the evaluation is the weight you assign to each of the evaluation factors. The weight you assign may vary depending upon your company's life cycle. For each factor, there should be a documented narrative that corresponds to your score. This ensures that there is some consistency among all the people assigning a score. And once a score and weight are determined and multiplied, a total is allocated to the opportunity. Your company should have a minimum acceptable score on opportunities in order to proceed with that pursuit. This thinking and analysis happens way before you're considering whether to submit a proposal, which is why I don't call this a bid-no-bid analysis. And this analysis of any given opportunity should be done several times as the opportunity progresses through your funnel or pipeline. Finally, it is the thinking and the discussions that surround this spreadsheet that result in the most effective decision-making and alignment among the BD team. If you are interested in a live, editable version of this spreadsheet, please send me an email. That's scollier@scaletomarket.com. This is one of the many tools to be used in your disciplined approach to federal business development. And speaking of disciplined approaches, what we've talked about so far is an ongoing effort to build and maintain a pipeline and an opportunity analysis tool. The last topic we're going to cover today is the disciplined and systematic approach required to drive profitable and sustainable growth in this complex market sector. If you have successfully completed your market intel work and have navigated and analyzed all the data that is available, you should end up with a targeted list of agencies, opportunities, contract vehicles, and strategies on which to focus your BD efforts. Now it's time to put together a specific action plan for each opportunity that you will pursue. This involves plans for developing relationships with your target agencies and teaming partners, conducting ongoing market research, and launching specific marketing campaigns to promote your value proposition. This is all before you decide to bid on an upcoming procurement and enter the capture phase. Finally, regularly assess your progress and make adjustments as necessary. The entire process is complex and dynamic and demands attention, monitoring, and constant measurement and adjustment. This completes our introductory presentation on developing a successful federal sector business development playbook. I hope you've gained some insights, and most importantly, that you see the value in developing a systematic, disciplined approach to growing your federal contracting business. This is Shirley Collier, signing off for now.
On this slide, we've listed some additional links to resources that you might find helpful as you develop and execute your own BD playbook. Thank you for joining us today. If you have additional questions or would like access to an on-demand version of this webinar to view again or to share with others in your company, please email us at questions@scaletomarket.com. Subscribe to the Growth Masters Federal podcast channel on our website at scaletomarket.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Registered webinar participants are entitled to a free 45-minute business development consultation with Mrs. Collier. Contact us to make those arrangements. Join us again soon for another informative Growth Masters Federal presentation.